Welcome to the Operation #Bio-Sul Nation webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me briefly introduce our panel of agronomists and agronomy coaches, and then I will set the stage for you as to what this conversation is going to look like. And we'll get right into the unscripted, very real conversation with the panel about how these folks as coaches help their farming clients succeed and some of the unique fertility choices they're working with to do so. Today on the line with me, we have all the way from Havre, Montana. It's a real pleasure, Lance Lindbloom. How are you doing there today, Lance?
I am doing good. Thank you.
Good. Well, we see the Zoom hasn't filtered out the hemp crop, unlike TikTok. So that's good. You haven't been canceled or censored.
Yeah.
Coming in live with that good looking hemp crop in the back. Also on the road today in Alberta, working out of Strathmore, Alberta, is Matt Gosling of Premium Ag. How are you doing there today, Matt?
Outside of a desperate need of a shave, I am doing fantastic. Thanks, Dan.
We don't get to see your soil sampling playoff beard because you're on the road, but still we'll get to hear your lovely baritone and your wisdom thusly. We're looking forward to that. And last but not least, we got another Matt. We're going to have to distinguish between the two Matts today. Matt Mace of Eastern Sky Ag Consulting out of Glaslyn, Saskatchewan. How are you doing there this morning, Matt?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
I am personally very excited about this conversation because my curiosity is piqued always to talk to good agronomists. So we're going to get right into the conversation very, very shortly. But firstly, why are we here today? What is the purpose of today's discussion? What are you going to learn in the next less than an hour? Well, farmers are staring down the barrel of one of the biggest opportunities likely in their farming career with historically high prices for commodities. The big challenge, though, is that fertilizer prices, and not to mention the price of everything else out there, are also at historical highs. And of course, we're all familiar with the fact that moisture has been a limiting factor this year. So it can be difficult to know exactly how to move ahead with clarity and confidence in a number of areas. And we've got the same challenges on our farm. I'll probably drag Terry into this conversation at some point. But really, Terry's always had a firm belief in the value of coaching. And these folks have all been part of AgriTrend, I guess, to some way, shape, or form in the past on the call today. But having coaches around you and having other people to help you make decisions is, at least if you make a wrong decision, you make it together with the objective experts in your camp. Not that anybody on this call has ever made any kind of mistake. Let's be real. These guys are 100% dead accurate in every call they make. But yeah. So really, it's extraordinary times. It requires some new thinking and strategies, and that's really where data and science and agronomy and coaching and decision making comes into play to help us make the right choices. And we've also got some new tools on the market to help us skin that cat when it comes to fertility. And it's been really interesting this year, like no other really since we started the business in 2015. I have been, and I think a lot of people in our network have been seeing almost more interest in the products and practices we'll be discussing today than ever. Largely, I think it's because of the commoditized fertilizer prices being so high, and also, there's a lot to be won and lost in today's market with price of grain. But there's also been a fundamental underlying movement to increase soil health that's being driven by our customers. The people that consume our goods in their bodies are thinking more about soil health and their own personal health and the health of the whole planet, frankly. So today we are going to be talking about Bio-Sul, which is a blend of compost and elemental sulfur from GFL Agriculture. It's a division of GFL Environmental, and their mission as a company is to use more of what we have to create more of what we need. I really like that because I think it's very common sense. And also we're going to talk about Super KS from Replenish Nutrients, and that is a regenerative fertilizer that acts as a probiotic for your soil. It feeds the soil microbes to increase nutrient uptake and leverage the soil's own biology to activate and release nutrients at the right time during the growing season. We'll hear from the agronomist today about how that all works under the hood. So one extraordinary fact before we get started here that I think is very interesting, in the Bio-Sul nation, so to speak, we've always had these progressive producers and agronomists who've jumped on board the program. It's been kind of extraordinary that that it's been so widely adopted in this sense. I don't really know of any other product or practice that's been, so widely adopted by so many agronomists that have incorporated this into their coaching business quite the same way. And today I really wanted to dig into each of these stories as to why are you guys recommending this to your customers? So that's my spiel. That's my introduction. That's framing the conversation. And from here, let's just start to get to know our panelists a little bit here quickly. Who should we start with? Lance?
I'd say start with Matt.
You want to start with Matt? Okay.
Take your pick.
People want to know. Okay, which Matt? I got two Matts here.
Either one.
Matt M or Matt G?
Choice.
Well, let's start with Matt Gosling. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and what you guys do.
Well, we've been doing agronomy now. We like to call ourselves precision agronomists now, not just an agronomist, but 18 years ago, our worst crop just got put in the bin. We're 98% done harvest. But, optimistically speaking, what we've done in 18 years is we've tried to coach our farmers to treat their soils carefully to get through a year like we've had. And what we've seen this year through all the coaching, this is the worst crop we've had in my 18 years by significant magnitude. But, glass half full, optimistically speaking, if you've got crop insurance and didn't price, if you stuck your head in the sand and didn't have a marketing plan, you're going to be okay. Our harvest costs are going to be half or less of what they traditionally are. Luckily, we priced inputs last year at an affordable price. So we've got room in our soil and hopefully in the budget to, still be very diligent about what we're doing to grow a good crop. We are going to grow a crop. I don't think a business can really survive without it. I briefly tiptoed around the conversation about follow with a couple guys this year, and it is on the table, which it hasn't been in a long time. But we're diversifying our business a little bit, getting into some research, and that's going surprisingly quickly and well. Outside of that, I'm a busy guy with 4 kids at home and a little hobby farm at night, which I just wrapped up here this week. So
yeah, you were feeding the pigs this morning.
Feeding the pigs, ran out of there. I've had a long history with Bio-Sul. I'm super excited about the KS. So once we get into that, I'd like to hear what these other guys have to say. And I kind of got all wrapped up into this because I've crossed paths too many times with the Godfather Neil Weens, and we spread the first ton of it back in July of 2013, and there's been no looking back. I can't even remember what ammonium sulfate looks like.
Historic moment. Wish we had TikTok back then. You could have made a TikTok reel about that moment.
Yeah.
As well, but it's gone. It's gone forever. It only lives in memory.
That's right.
Okay, so we're going to circle back on a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how you actually are working with producers this fall for next year and stuff and into the future. That's kind of the next question. But let's hear more about the other panelists. Lance, tell us about yourself and your business.
Yeah, I'm Lance Lindbloom with 406 Agronomy. We are an agronomy division embedded in the Torgerson dealership. We have been since the start, a little over 7 years ago. It was a vision of the Torgerson family of, how can they bring agronomy, to the community, but also it's a realistic view from them. They have 2 farms, and they knew that they needed that extra coaching, both on the agronomy side and on the precision side. So we started a little over 7.5 years ago. We have 5 agronomists, 1 data specialist / promotion specialist / do everything specialist. So we're in, Torgerson's has 11 locations. Right now we are in 3, and it looks like by the end of next year, we should be in 5. So that's a little bit of background of where we're at. 90%, 95% of our emphasis is on coaching. So we started with the AgriTrend network from day one, and we've used that same model that we're using, the AgriTrend, that model of the coaching model from the planning all the way through the harvest. And that's where the majority of our time is spent, is on the coaching side of things.
Awesome. Great to hear. Sounds like an awesome business. Matt Mace, tell us about yourself and your business.
Matt Mace with Eastern Sky Ag Consulting in Glaslyn, Saskatchewan. We're north and North Battleford, about 45 minutes. We just finished coaching our 6th year of agronomy coaching in this area. And so we offer agrology services, and pretty much from year number 1 and 2, we adopted precision agriculture right off the bat, and we tried to bring that onto all of the farms that we work with at various levels right off the bat. And that's worked very, very well in this area. Guys are ready to do things as precisely as possible, and with technology that we have at our fingertips, it's easy to do that. We've been using Bio-Sul now. We just finished our 4th crop on some Bio-Sul acres, so we're pretty excited about the data that we're collecting there, and excited about the last year coming up and some reapplication coming in 2023. So that's us in a nutshell for now.
Awesome. Okay, so the first thing I want you guys to frame for the people on the call, give us a sense of how you work with producers. If I walk in the door tomorrow, I'm looking for an agronomy coach. In a nutshell, what is the process? What do you help producers with? Matt Gosling, go.
Right now is honestly my favorite time of year, especially putting this crop in the rearview mirror. But I like the big picture, the big strategy stuff, big decisions. There's only so many 10,000 soil tests a guy can look at, and they've all got their intricacies. And when you bring your mind and your spirit into a field, you kind of get embedded in it. And part of the reason why Andrew and I are sampling this year is just that. We want to reconnect with our fields and look at the new zoning process that we're doing to validate things. But making a rotation is basically step 1. We got to look at, this year our canola got kicked in the teeth, all of our crops. But we really have to be cognizant of our spend. And if canola seed is going to be tight, and there's very real issues in our supply chain that we have to consider. So, you should, I pray that every farmer out there has a real good relationship with their retailer, and they treat them respectfully, because they go through a lot of crap. And in a tight margin business, everything's tight margin. But be organized about stuff like inventory the liability, whether it be fertilizer or inputs or seed. Seed is short. Glyphosate might be short. Glufosinate might be short. Urea has gone up damn near $200 a ton in the last 2 weeks, and plants are shutting down. Like, be organized. So it as quickly as we can right now, we're letting guys kind of get over the harvest hangover. We meet with them right away, get our rotation. And a lot of guys do have a somewhat set rotation, but it's always up for discussion. A rotation has to be flexible. We're already seeing early indicators that canola might be seeded a little less and barley might be seeded a little less. Lentils might be up a little bit. Wheat might be up a little bit. So these are things, in booking fertilizer, we didn't book any fertilizer. Typically, when we go to Ag in Motion, we're booking fertilizer throughout the entire show, and we didn't book any fertilizer, just with the nervousness of the crop. We didn't really have anybody keen to spend money or commit to big spends. But looking back, would it have been the right thing to do? Probably. Just looking at the last 2 weeks. So how are we going to test? There has, precision ag almost sells itself on a year like this, because in the areas that produced, it was 4 or 5, 6 times, even though it was way less bushels, when you hit the productive spots of your field, you're getting 30 bushels of wheat, and the rest of the field you're getting single digit. So we're making new zones. We're having to sample all this stuff and try to get back some timely results. And unfortunately, it's a really hard thing to do right now with fertilizer going up at the rate that it is. So you have to make some assumptions, and some of those assumptions with years and years of soil test history and knowing your grower and their tolerance to risk and their cash flow situation, and you get embedded into so many decisions on a farm that I like to say that we are a coach. We're not an agronomist, and you're on their front bench of making decisions on much more than just agronomy. So I love that, the kitchen table, board of directors stuff, making big strategy decisions on what to grow, how to grow it, and our philosophy. I've had a lot of guys through conversation over the last couple of years ask me what my view of regenerative agriculture is. Oh, you're listening. This is fantastic, because everybody's definition should be different, but this is mine. And you can just see the cogs kind of turning, and when you circle back to what's gone on with federal policy and rumors of fertilizer restriction, and how many years of, in the circles that I kind of hang with, been talking about pre-harvest glyphosate being made illegal. It's probably the wrong word, but not a recommended practice. We have to get used to that. So precision ag, I just want to be precise. And this year, there is no more important year than I've had in 18 to be precise about what we do when it comes to making all decisions. Luckily, we do have commodity prices that are still strong, but unlike last year, where I was so pumped to have historically profitable years for all of our farms, even though we knew water was a little short, we could not predict that we'd have over 30 days of over 30 degrees Celsius with 4 inches of rain on a subpar soil moisture bank. But on March 31st, going into seeding season, we were giddy to be historically profitable. Didn't happen. We booked all of our inputs at really affordable prices. And now with these price increases, damn near half our fertilizer costs were half of what they are today. So we still have a big chance to be really profitable, maybe not historically. But anyway,
Wow, you said a lot of things there.
I did.
You covered a lot of ground. And I wouldn't even know where to start on to giving you feedback. But the one thing I love the most that you said is when you're embedding your mind and spirit in a field. I mean, that's got to be kind of a visceral experience for agronomists. And maybe you guys all know what Matt's talking about. So Lance, how do you embed your mind and a spirit in a field like Matt here? How do you whisper to a field? Field whisper.
Yeah, field whisper. Definitely in the same line with Matt. At this time of year, the planning is that is one of our highlights. But I sometimes struggle on which one's my favorite, because what's awesome about this field is it's so diverse. So usually scouting, I'd love to be out there. I've always been an outdoor person. I like to see things growing. Yeah, this year scouting may have taken on a different feel. Feel like you're more of a fireman out there putting fires out most of the time. So, but yeah, our season's a little bit different as we have quite a bit of winter wheat here. So our planting starts a lot of times in August, and our contracts with our producers start the 1st of September. That's our growing year is September 1 to August 31st. So we do a big part of what we do is that planning, and especially with years like this, it just seems to be more of an emphasis that planning on the rotations, that knowing your costs is just essential. And I like numbers, so it's a great time of the year for I think all of our coaches sitting down and that plugging in the agronomy with the financial side of it and the logistics, and yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. We are heavily in soil sampling, just finishing up most of our winter wheat. We've got a few guys out there still with a chickpea field here and there. Harvest is all done, and the sitting down and working through those numbers with the producers and that relationship is by far one of our most positive things that we do.
That's a privilege for sure. Very exciting stuff to work with producers. So Matt, how are you working with producers right now?
So probably our main focus right from day one is we wanted to help our guys increase return on investment on their farms. And so the planning process is extremely important for us. Sometimes increasing ROI does mean higher yields, but not all the time. It's that planning process throughout the winter. We try and meet with our clients once a month for sure. And it might be talking about herbicide rotations. It might be talking about fertilizer planning. Do they bring their blends home early? Is there trucking incentives? All sorts of things like that. And every penny that we can save helps them at the end of the year. And we've been very successful with our client base. They've been very satisfied with those extra savings and just realizing that they've got some money to work with. So when we come into a year like this, where things have been very difficult, some of the historical planning that we've done over the last 3 or 4 years with some of our long-term nutrients like phosphate and potassium paid off this year. But those investment dollars, we look to maybe be able to utilize those dollars going into 2022 and not have to realize some of the high prices that are out there for those long-term nutrients. And with soil sampling, with less of a crop out there, we're anticipating being able to find some of the mobile nutrients like nitrogen trapped in a clay layer. We sample deep, we go to 2 feet. We make sure we want to find as much as we can for our guys. So the more nutrients they've got in their soil and the more planning that we can put into that process over the short term and the long term, that just will help on a year like what we're going to be facing for 2022. I'm actually really excited about where that planning process is going to go over the next couple of months, and that guys are actually going to be quite surprised that their fertilizer costs and some of their input costs may not be near as high as they're thinking, even considering where pricing is currently today.
Love it. Okay, I just want to take a breath there. We're 25 minutes in, right? We got 35 minutes left to respect everybody's time on the hour. So when we have, questions, let's keep it succinct and to the point and get around the panel. And I would encourage the audience to ask questions. Kent, thank you for the question. We'll get there in good time. If you don't mind, if I can just move a little bit more through the program and we'll address that. But what I want to talk about next is why, as an agronomist, guys, did you decide to adopt Bio-Sul as part of your practice and your art? Because most agronomists don't get involved with products. They stay non-biased, so to speak. Not that anybody on this call is biased, but you're biased enough towards a product in practice to adopt it, incorporate it for your customers who are paying you for their advice. So why in the heck are you doing that, Matt?
Go to Mace. I'm going through a coulee. I might have to call you back.
Okay.
Alberta stuff. Yeah, let's mix it up.
Well,
Okay, let's hear from
we'll
you,
jump
Matt.
in. Okay,
Good thing we have two Matts.
So how we got into Bio-Sul is we have our top 0 to 6, 0 to 8-inch soil profile is quite sandy and silty. Most of our textures come back 75 to 80% sand and silt, 20 to 25% clay. So we have a very mobile soil structure. So our mobile nutrients like nitrogen and sulfur, we wanted to come up with a way to manage those nutrients better. And the conversation started 5 years ago. And so with sulfur, we were asking what can we do with our sulfur program to help that particular mobile nutrient. And the answer came back, we need to talk to Aberhart Ag about Bio-Sul. And so the conversation started, and then with the product having compost, there's recycled groceries in there, and then recycled elemental sulfur. Like, we're taking two products that normally would not get used, and we're putting them together, and producers can now use them for a benefit on their land. There's biology that comes with it through the compost, and the slow drip release of the elemental sulfur married up and fit perfectly with what we were requiring up here to manage that mobile nutrient. And so we jumped in with both feet, and we've had it on the ground for 4 years, and it is absolutely performing exactly like we asked it to perform.
Awesome. Sounds good. Lance, can you tell us about your experience getting started with the product and practice?
You bet. And it goes back to the analytics part of what we do on the coaching part. And Elson Solberg would always say sometimes your plants are talking to you, or they're giving you signals. Our plants are kind of screaming at us that we were having some sulfur issues, some deficiency issues. Even though our soil test might have been saying something else, our plants were saying that we needed to be addressing sulfur. So that was a red flag for us. So how can we do that? And then it really, the big emphasis was just strictly logistics, that ability to take, a product like Bio-Sul and apply it, take it out of the drill, take it out of the cart. There's no seed safety issues for us. So the logistics became a huge part of what we do. The reason why of moving to Bio-Sul, and just being able to get behind the product. Having the compost, like Matt was talking about, it's a great product to get behind because of the compost in there, and it's taking a renewable resource there and utilizing it as something that we can use.
So what have you guys been seeing with your clients now that you're X amount of years into the program? How do you measure that? And what would you say the results have been in terms of the economics, the logistics, and the agronomy? Lance, why don't you start this one?
For sure. Once we started using Bio-Sul, we started picking that up in our tissues. So we knew that it was 2, 3, 4. We are in probably our 4th year on Bio-Sul. I think we started Bio-Sul about 4 years. So we're at the end of it. Our strategy was a 4-year program on the elemental sulfur side of things. Yeah. So definitely being able to pick that up. We've definitely seen that ratio, that ideal ratio that we're looking at in tissues with the nitrogen and the sulfur, and on our small cereals for protein. And we've seen that being corrected where we just couldn't get it without coming in with a rescue type of strategy in season.
So why are you guys concerned about the N/S ratio, and why aren't you, you mentioned tissues a lot, but you didn't mention soil testing. What's the difference there, and why are you concerned about the N/S ratio in the tissues?
Matt, you want to go on that, or did we lose Matt yet?
Oh, no, we haven't got the second Matt back. Or is Matt?
That is the first time I've ever held a call through that coulee. Like, I heard every single word. So it's going to be a good day, you guys.
Divine intervention, my friend. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
So a little light bulb went off when Matt was talking about this. And I know, back to the regenerative type movement, One of my fellow colleagues is working for one of the Big 12 doing regenerative verification, and there's a list of boxes you need to tick. And I'm pretty sure that one of the boxes there that isn't able to be ticked is what fertilizer sources are you using? And this is completely regenerative, because otherwise both the organic waste and the elemental sulfur would have been put in a landfill, gone forever, uncaptured nutrient for growing more food. You can't be more regenerative than that. So side spiel, but making nitrogen more efficient. Like, you know, the whole premise of my conversation with ample sulfur fertility is going back to precision, and knowing that we've got a product that works. Like I think at Elston, he said that we've got the biggest global set of data on the planet on elemental sulfur, premium ag, with the history we've had, because before Bio-Sul, we were using 3 years worth of Tiger. And before that, we were using aggressive rates of ammonium sulfate. Like, plants can't read. A pound of sulfur is a pound of sulfur, and I don't think any one of them is any better than the other. There are certain attributes of each product that are better than the other. And yes, we've got a bias to Bio-Sul because we know it works. The particle sizes vary, so we've got that kind of slow release sort of aspect. And let the haters hate. If they want to go and pick out the 2 or 3% of chunks the size of your pinky fingernail, then whatever. I know I do not lose sleep over it working. And the N to S ratio, the sulfur doesn't complicate, an abundance of sulfur doesn't complicate any other nutrient interaction that the plant has. But what it does is it helps nitrogen efficiency. So in malt barley, for example, we get super conservative with our nitrogen use ratios in malt barley, because we know that our nitrogen is going to be, I've never been able to put my thumb on it, but probably somewhere between 10 and 25% more efficient. So instead of using 1.3 or 1.4 pounds of nitrogen per bushel on malt barley, we're going to use 1 or 1.2, somewhere in there, depending on how aggressive the grower wants to get. You know, and every crop uses it. Peas probably use as much or more. Corn, you know, how much nitrogen do you plan on pulling out of the system? If you're going to plan on pulling more nitrogen, you need more sulfur. And that, you know, when we look at tissue tests, it is a very tricky analytical piece to analyze. And one of the problems I've always had with tissue tests is that we never have a plant measurement of a tissue test. Because 1% of sulfur in a plant that's 1 foot tall versus a plant that's 2 feet tall with 1% sulfur has twice as much sulfur, even though it says the same number. That's always been a brain cramp for me, because with the variability in our landscape, we do not need to put 220 pounds of Bio-Sul down on every single acre. That should not, in my opinion, that's not good practice. We need to look at our expected removal rates, our soil texture. Like with Maess there, we can circle back to the chloride issue as another mobile nutrient with the Super KS. But in an 80% sand, I wouldn't want to be putting much more than 4 years application rate down. So putting down a big rate versus going to a high organic matter black soil that's got some clay and loam in it, if you wanted to, if you own the land, you can probably get away with the big application and not really worry about it disappearing out of the system. So, you know, do your hilltops deserve as much as your foot slopes?
Yeah, we've definitely seen some more flexibility on rates as we got more comfortable with the product. You know, there's less horseshoes and hand grenades, and getting into precision, I think, is going to be more of a thing as we get into custom blending and and more of exactly what's needed. Matt, Mace, what have you seen with your customers using Bio-Sul as a practice?
So we've seen very strong tissue results once we started using Bio-Sul. We typically are seeing stronger sulfur numbers over an AMS type program. One of the interesting things that we've seen, and it typically happens in year number 2 of the Bio-Sul, is it's pulling some of the phosphate and potassium out of the soil a little bit more efficiently into the top of the plant, which kind of follows with Mulder's chart, where sulfur kind of interacts with every nutrient that's in the soil and in the plant. And so if we're helping some of those long-term nutrients and with nitrogen be more efficient in the plant, then that gives it a value as well. And nitrogen to sulfur ratios is huge for us. If we can keep a nitrogen to sulfur ratio in any crop strong right through reproduction and into seed set, we're going to have larger seed size. This year, with it being so dry, we actually did have fields across the fence line, non-Bio-Sul, Bio-Sul, with 4 to 5 pounds difference in test weight. So elemental sulfur is pushing that N-to-S ratio right through reproduction, and larger seed size, heavier test weights, and more marketability. If your barley is not light, if it's 50 plus 52, 53 pounds, it's a lot easier to market it and a little bit more stress-free. So that's been huge. N-to-S ratios, and kind of noticing those long-term nutrients like phos and potassium that pulled up through into the plant too. We're pretty happy to see that as well. So tissues is important. We watch those numbers pretty carefully, and but that's what we've been seeing up here.
Spoken like true agronomists. What about the economics and the logistics? Maybe that's the biggest piece, although we wish agronomy was first and foremost. But what do you guys have to say about the logistics, Lance?
I was going to just say one more thing. It was kind of interesting.
Go ahead.
Matt G had said, one of the things that they had saw, you guys have seen, is in malt barley. And that was actually our first crop. You just don't think of malt barley being one that you're worried about the nitrogen on, but exactly what Matt was saying is the efficiency on the nitrogen. So we were able to dial back our rate of nitrogen, keep the yield up and our test weights up. And it was just night and day difference after about that second year on that elemental sulfur. So kind of cool. Cross borders, both malt barley and sulfur works on both sides. So
I think that's one of the big themes is, it works in ways that you don't expect on crops that you don't always think of. And we need a lot more for most of the crops than we envision, because common knowledge is that we would need X amount of pound, half a pound of sulfur per bushel of canola. And that's kind of where the story stops. But it's a vast story beyond that. Let's, in the interest of time here, I guess the one question that we should answer before we move on from Bio-Sul to the potash portion is, how are you guys feeling about a dry year like 2021? How does that affect Bio-Sul and its breakdown from fall 2020? Will it limit the availability of Maess? How would you guys manage that from an agronomist point of view, or whatever point of view you want to take on it? Matt, Mace, did you want to go?
Yeah, so in a dry year up here, like we had about 4 inches of rain throughout our growing season, so we're typically at 10 to 14 inches, so we're quite dry. Elemental sulfur does need moisture to break down. It's one of the proponents that helps it break down. But if your crop isn't yielding what it normally does because of a drier year, it's not going to need that big shot of sulfur regardless, because again, it's all about nitrogen to sulfur ratio. So if you've only used 80 pounds of your N instead of 140 pounds of your N, then the nitrogen to sulfur ratio is a lot skinnier. You need less S as well. So even whether or not the sulfur releases in a dry year like this, if it's probably not going to release as fully as it would in a wetter year, but even if it does, it will make its way into the clay seams and it'll be available for next year's crop.
Awesome. in the interest of time, we got 19 minutes left. I don't know, Lance and Matt, if you have anything to add to that, but I hope that answers Kent's question. I'd like to get on to potash here in the time that we have left, because I think that's a topic that most of the people on the call are probably as interested in as anything. That's the sulfur conversation. So looking forward now that there's options for more nutrients to be combined with this application, where are your producers and where is your planning and coaching going on this opportunity for potash now, getting it out of the drill, and of course the economic opportunity this year on potash via our sales channel is extraordinary. What do you guys have to say about that whole potash thing? Where should we start? Matt, do you want to start on this one and make it succinct there?
As far as I'm concerned, moving forward with Bio-Sul, I don't think it should ever not be attached to potassium at all. We've got one farm in our portfolio with very well managed manure that doesn't require potassium. Outside of that, of course it goes back to your soil test, but the potassium in this is going to be much more aggressively priced than potassium on the market today. And potassium has so much to do biologically, which I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around. But listening to Greg Patterson at A&L through the history that I've known him and the webinars through last winter, speaking about all the attributes of potassium, it does not make any sense to me to take to put potassium in the drill at a higher price. It's abrasive. It's got one of the higher salt indexes around. So again, it is a very condensed product, but taking it out of the drill, there's going to be those efficiencies. There's going to be a massive cost advantage. And now instead of the 15 to 25 actual pounds of K going down the drill, this is your opportunity to put down the big dose. We can get 40, 50, 60, 100 pounds of potassium down. And one of my old colleagues around Red Deer said the only differentiating factor that he has had in his growing and coaching career going back to 1997 is that he put 50 pounds of product down every single year. And he thinks that he is better than his neighbors solely because of his aggressive potassium strategy in a less than 0.1 K to mg ratio soil. So if you're in that category and your agronomist is waving a big red flag, always talking about we need more potassium, this is the chance. So in a sense, we can almost change the entire conversation over to a big emphasis on K with the Bio-Sul as a topper-upper, especially if you've had it on the field before. You've got the biology, you've got that bank account there, but what do we need for the next 3 or 4 years of sulfur? That's a really easy piece to figure out. But now we can get really aggressive with K and have a blend that's dialed into your farm and your field specifics. I think it's a home run. It's awesome.
Love it. Lance, you gave me a brilliant analogy last night there about a shotgun on a solar panel.
Yeah, that's, when you look at like Super KS, we're killing 3 birds with 1 stone. So we're taking 3 things out of that cart. We're taking potassium, taking sulfur, and then one of the things that's overlooked a lot is chloride. And it was one of those nutrients that when we were starting to push on the tissue samples, that both potassium and chloride were coming low in coming back on our tissue tests. And one of the things that you can see if you have a low chloride on your plant uptake is low on chloride, you'll start seeing physiology, disease, leaf disease, little spots on those leaves. And I had a producer ask me, okay, what kind of ROI does that really provide for me? We know that we're getting into that plant. And you could kind of go back to what is that plant? That plant is an organic solar panels. That's all they are. So those leaves out there are collecting sunlight. And if we got a bunch of holes on them, it's just like taking a shotgun to a solar panel. The efficiency just is going drastically downhill. Now, can we put a number on that? I'm sure we could put some models to that and figure out, you know, the area, that how many holes are out there. But we know when we start seeing dead spots on a leaf that we are definitely losing efficiency. And in our world, efficiency is yield.
And you switched almost everything to have the potassium in your geography as well, just because of your soil requirements, right?
We did, yes, for sure. And going back to what we're seeing on the tissue samples, and we're picking up more. Montana is known to have quite a bit of potassium in the soils, but we also have very high levels of magnesium. And we're starting to see areas that not only, you know, we're also seeing lower levels of potassium. It has not been a nutrient that's been, you know, applied a lot here. And if you look at it on removal, it's the second most removed by the plant behind nitrogen. It sometimes gets, you know, drowned out by phosphorus. Phosphorus seems to be our big one. We're always worried about phosphorus, but potassium is a high removal rate with it. And we need to address that.
Awesome.
Lance, I'm trying to rack my brain. I don't think chloride is typically included in a typical tissue test. Is that an add-on then?
It is. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we added chloride in all of our small grains and our oil seeds. Yep. Just specifically for that. Yeah.
Matt, why are you excited? You're pretty stoked about this evolution. What's the dealio?
Yeah, we're really happy with potassium joining Bio-Sul and Super KS. Our soils up here are typically very potassium deficient to start with. We also have very high magnesium levels, so our K to mag ratios are totally in the tank. And so we have been talking with our agronomy clients for sure about getting potassium rates in their drills up to removal rates. But even when we look at the nitrogen to potassium ratio for any particular crop in Western Canada, it's 1-to-1. So if you look at a 50 bushel wheat crop, it needs 130 pounds of nitrogen coming from somewhere. And at a 1-to-1 ratio, it needs 130 pounds of potassium as well for it to get to 50 bushels. And like Lance said, the removal rates, we're talking 30 to 35 pounds, maybe even more in removal. But that plant needs all that potassium to be taken up for it to get to that 50 bushel. Then it's going to remove some of that. And if we're short in the soil to start with, and we've got magnesium tying it up, we just need to supply more of it. And we've had guys actually ask us, not really interested in Bio-Sul today, but boy, if you could put potash in there, we're in. And so this is where we are today. And we're very, very excited about this fall for Super KS in this area.
Well, and Matt, you've been one of the guys who's continually coming to me and saying, hey, did you know how much I'm saving customers comparing against conventional means? And the dollars are striking. I know you had some reservations about sharing the dollars because it's specific to your area. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the economics so people can get a picture? I mean, obviously, rates might differ based on geography, but just give us a snapshot of the actual dollars we're talking about here.
So in our area up here in Glaslyn, and so anyone on the call, make sure you understand that this is for us up here. But in general, on a 003530 Super KS standard blend, we priced it out last night for a guy. He's going to save just over $17 an acre per year. And we are recommending a 3-year program on that. So that for this year is equating into some really huge economics. Not only is there the agronomic benefits and the logistic benefits, because in Super KS, on that particular blend, we're removing 130 pounds of total applied product out of the drill. And so that's big time logistics benefits, big time agronomic benefits, and now we've got the economics to go with it. So we're pretty excited this fall.
Did you hear that, Terry? If you put on Super KS, you can almost afford to hire me on the farm.
Almost.
You're getting there. Well, okay, I want to, is there any more questions from the audience? I mean, we could go on. I mean, I wish it was 2 hours operation #Bio-Sul Nation, but we got to respect everybody's time. If there's any questions that come in yet, we'll try and get to them. But I mean, there's so much more things that we could talk about, and talking with agronomists in this business has been one of the greatest privileges of many that I've experienced. So I really appreciate you guys to have such, like, I always thought, you know what, it takes a lot of chutzpah and courage to get paid for your advice. And every agronomist I've ever worked with said, oh, I'm not a salesperson. Well, you've got to sell yourself that your advice, your partnership is of value to get people to write that check for you every year. But in a year like this, I think it's so much more important than ever. And you guys are providing a huge service, and you're simplifying producers' life. You're working with folks to make, things clear. And of course, Bio-Sul and Super Chaos aside, there's hundreds of decisions for every average producer to make on the multi-million-dollar operations that everybody's working with. So it's a challenge, but I would, I'm going to read this little blurb from my brother, and then I'm going to give everybody a chance to wrap things up. We got 8 minutes left. So my little brother had to run, but he said, on a year like this, soil testing, working with a good agronomist to create strategies to minimize risk while maximizing yield and nutrient use efficiency is where good coaching can be extremely valuable. Getting your PK&S balanced in your soil and crops will provide better crops and handle stress and utilize nitrogen in a more efficient way. He's been using potash forever and a day, and he's switching to Super KS this fall. On our farm this year, we're seeing an average of 35 pounds more N over last year on our soils test at 70 cents a pound. That's a big deal. Today's nitrogen prices, that's about $25 an acre, or $400,000 of nutrient value we can leverage. Again, maybe you're getting closer to being able to hire me for the farm, but working with a good agronomist and leveraging what's in our soils, like the guys that we have here, right? In previous years, strong agronomy planning, that's one of the best RIOs. I think he meant ROI, but that's one of the best return on investments in any input on your farm. And so while not all growers initially see it that way, the RIO, he made it twice. Maybe that's a new one. But the ROI can value a good agronomy plan on your farm will pay huge dividends. I think that's a huge theme. And actually our next webinar, we're going to have another agronomist on and talk exactly about that. So one of the reasons that we feel strong agronomy planning is the most valuable inputs on your farm. Great panels, great comments from the panelists. And I agree. I think anybody who's on the call, great comments. Let's wrap this thing up, take it home, whatever you guys want to share with the audience as far as final thoughts. Lance, why don't you go ahead?
Maybe Terry can hire you part-time now. You can go start part-time.
I will consult.
Yeah, we're all agronomists on this panel here, but logistics plays a huge part in what we do. And I can't emphasize that more. Like Matt was saying, they're figuring 130 pounds per acre. We're at about the rates we're at is about 92 to 95 pounds an acre out of the cart. And that's huge when you talk about, timeliness. Time is very valuable, whether it's time of a producer, the CEO of their company trying to do planning, but it's also crucial time at seeding time. So that ability to take that out of the cart, those tons out of the cart, not even talking about the wear and tear, like Matt G was talking about, potassium is pretty corrosive, pretty hard on equipment itself. So the logistic part of it is huge, and we cannot emphasize that enough.
Awesome. Thanks, Lance, for coming on the webinar. It's been great to get to know you a little bit better and hear, Montana perspective. Matt Mace, we got 5 minutes left, and we know that Matt's going to talk for about 15, so pace yourself accordingly.
I'll sneak in here.
Ouch.
So there's a couple of questions came through, and one of them had to do with potassium uptake and K to mag ratio. So I'm going to finish off by answering that.
Sure.
In our crop planning up here, we use 0.2 to 0.35 K to mag ratio. If our K mag ratio is somewhere in there, we're reasonably comfortable that potassium is going to make it into the plant, but we're still going to watch our tissues pretty carefully if we're down around 0.2. If our K to mag ratios are getting to 0.15, 0.1, or if it's a historical livestock operation and they've been baling some straw and things like that, we could be as low as 0.05. Now we're in trouble. We're in big time potassium trouble. So we're either addressing it with large amounts of potassium, or we're addressing it with foliar applications, watching tissue tests. So those are kind of the ranges and the numbers that we look at as far as potassium uptake. Anything under 0.2 is caution sign. Anything under 0.1, we're getting pretty aggressive with some potassium.
Great coaching. I muted you there, Matt. But hopefully you can. I've asked to unmute you, so you can have your final say. But yeah, Matt, thanks so much for your comments, Matt Mace. Really appreciate it. Matt G, you got the final word if you're able to unmute yourself. We just had some dinging there. I'm asking to unmute you. But folks, thanks so much for attending our presentation. You can find more out about these products at aberhartagsolutions.ca and replenishnutrients.com with the Super KS. I'm just going to double check. That's, replenishnutrients.com. And then GFLENV.com is GFL's mothership site. But of course, GFL Agriculture is going to be hitting the proverbial airways here soon. So lots good coming from them. And I just want to say thanks to all of you folks for coming on and providing your agronomic coaching and knowledge. Thanks to all the participants, and thanks to all of our network who's working so hard to get this product out there. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of this stuff going out this fall, and it's going to be a wild fall. And we've had interest like we've never had before because of everything that you heard today, the price point, the agronomics, the economics, and we're in for a big fall and hopefully a really great year in 2022. Can you imagine how great it's going to be if everything conspires to be a little bit kinder to us this year? We've been through a lot, and karma is always a balancing act. And we know we're in for some, I believe, some success going forward. So thanks, guys, for coming on the call. I hope everybody got value out of it. I wish we could give Matt the final word, but I've asked to unmute him, and unfortunately, I'll just have to thank him on behalf of everybody. But everybody have a great fall season here. It's a pretty wide open season. The weather's still really nice. Spreaders are starting to roll. We've been delivering a lot of product. So if you're interested in any of those products, check out aberhartagsolutions.ca. Check out our trusted applicator page, and you can get product delivered hands-free. Basically, just give us your legals and we'll roll, and you'll be on the program these guys were talking about here today. So thanks, everybody. That is the launch of Operation #Bio-Sul Nation for the fall of 21. Enjoy. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Dan.
Thanks so much.